everyone, Ernie Tech here, and I hope you're staying cool wherever you are. It is July the 28th, 2025, and in the concrete continuum where I live, up in the northeast part of the state, somewhere between Philadelphia and New York City, it is brutal out there. It's about 93 degrees on this Monday. Tomorrow's going to be 97. I think Wednesday's going to hit 100 again, with a real field temperature of 455 billion. Yeah, it's brutal. So I'm staying in my office here, playing around with the stuff that I play around with best, and that is the technology stuff I really enjoy. The boss is somewhere upstairs having his nap, which is a good thing. And we're going to talk about a couple things today. We're going to talk about this piece of software that I found called CoolRetroTerm, which is eye candy. It's an eye candy enhancer for your terminal experience, in Linux. It makes your terminal look sort of like it is a CRT, and it's very configurable, real fun, and it actually is even more fun when you're using it with a 3270 emulator, and you're calling in or dialing in or connecting to your favorite mainframe Hercules environment, or something to that effect. Okay, let's talk about that, and let's talk about terminals in general. So there is this website. There's a website for everything. There is a website for guys who collect misspelled labels on beer bottles. I'm sure of that. I think I saw that. Maybe not. Anyhow, there is a website for everything. This is called terminalswiki.org, and it is about everything terminal, all the different kinds of stuff that you may have seen or sat in front of while your boss is telling you to get on with it, and you have no idea what you're doing. You're pushing buttons, and things are going sideways, and then he realizes you have no clue what you're doing. Those kinds of terminals. And here they are. And this is in the IBM world. You're going to see a lot of different ones. If you had come from, let's say, a Burroughs environment, or a Sperry, or a Univac, or a Cray, or wherever you came from, controlled data, controlled general, data general, EIEIO, Hitachi, Fujitsu, good grief, Bull. So, yeah, there's a lot of terminals out there, but if you were a Joe average IBMer, this is probably the ones that you saw most. And for the most part, they were monochrome. Later on, they became color. You had maybe 7 colors. Some had 4. Different models starting in the 70s, in the 3277 and beyond. There were things before that which were really, I don't know, more of a glorified typewriter, I think. And as they went up in time, they became more capable. And then finally, you get into the late 80s. And you have a lot of real estate, 62 by 160, 27, well, mostly look at that. We are going to be hanging in this area mostly, maybe in the 3279 area, or 78, 79 area with this emulator, and that's just fine. Now, one thing I'm not sure of, and someone can tell me this, and that is, when did the amber screen start coming into play? Because when I was playing with stuff back in the 80s and 70s, it was all green, monochrome green, and I never got my hands on anything beyond that, and then I was off, trying to make a living. But there was an amber in a version of something, and let me know in the comments section when that came into place. So these are all the different kinds of, or a subset, or maybe I missed something, or maybe there's more to it, or maybe I've convoluted this, but I think in general this is a good timeline from the early 70s up until the late 80s of many of the different kinds of terminal models that you might have run into, and they look kind of like this from that. And I call this the R2D2 over to this, which is, I'm not even sure what that's just cool looking. Anyhow. And more importantly, if you were in a shop like I was, so back in the early 80s, I worked for an engineering firm. And the engineering firm, we did plumbing, engineering, AEC they called it, architecture, engineering, and construction type of stuff. And we helped build buildings. That's what you build. And one of the things we wanted to do was be able to talk to a central computer. Now, we had in the office a guy who was really into all this stuff, and he kind of knew what he was doing, and he set up an old Unix box. It was actually a Unix 5, an AT&T Unix 5 box, and he networked it. And one of the things that he did was we ran around cables, we ran coax cables all over the place, and we had these machines, or ones like, I think we had some compacts, but they were sort of like this. They were almost clones of the 5150 PC. And inside there, they had these boards, these communications boards. And as I recall them, they were IRMA boards. And you would put them into the ISA channels. You would change whatever needed to be changed. It was the DMA. The IRQ had to be set so it wouldn't conflict with something else, and various things. There were also boards in a couple of them which went right to printer to pen plotters, these big desktop pen plotters. To me, it was amazing. It was rocket science, and I look back on it and I think, boy, we were really at the crisp, that we were in the middle of it, crux of it. That's it. And a lot of these things are not so fresh in my memory, but as I go through this process, they start to come back. But the other thing was there was apparently an IRMA board for the Apple II. I never saw this. I know of nobody who ever saw that. I know of nobody who ever communicated using an Apple into something beyond itself or a dial-up BBS or something. But there was one for that, and that's what it looked like. It was a big honking thing. There was no surface mount technology there. Man, we were talking about big old DIP dual line package ICs and BNC connectors and edge connectors and man, oh man, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it was a heady time to say the least. But this is important because these two things here, this IBM and this Apple, also have the ability to be sort of emulated by this CoolRetroTerm, the look and feel anyway. All right, what is this CoolRetroTerm? Well, as you can tell by the graphic here, it tries to look like what a old CRT might look like. Now, I look at that and I think, well, it kind of reminds me of what an old CRT that's about ready to die looks like, because the amount of blooming and the amount of burn-in means that that particular machine or that particular CRT must have really been in its last legs. Things weren't that terrible from what I remember, but you could make it look like that if you want. So on the web page, and there it is right there, the GitHub page, this is what the guy who created it says, is that it's a terminal emulator for Linux which mimics the look and feel of old cathode ray tubes and has been designed to be eye candy. That's important because the customization of this is primarily for eye candy. There's a couple of command line arguments that you can put in. For instance, you can put in, I don't know, some of the timing issues, but you'll see. It uses different libraries for the development environment, Qt5, and so on and so forth. And this is what it gives you. So that's a neat looking thing. It offers nothing, as far as I'm concerned, as far as a benefit to the regular old shell terminal environment. And remind, this is not the 3270 environment. This is just your standard Linux bash shell command line environment. You get into the 3270 emulator within that. I'll show you in a second. All right, so on my end, it's a little bit more involved. And the reason why is because I have a Windows machine as my primary tool. So what I have to do is I have to decide, either I put in a virtual machine and load an ISO, like most people would do, or I activate the Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is no big deal, and it's a lot easier because it's right there at your ready all the time. So what is the Windows Subsystem for Linux? Well, it's a layer. It's a layer that allows intermediate calls to the operating system to respond to the Linux environment versus the System32, the Windows environment. So that's all it is. It's a layer, and it's very fast, and you don't even know there's an extra step or two going on. So you can open up a window, PowerShell was what I use, and you can call WSL, log in, and the next thing you know, you are at an Ubuntu, which was my flavor. You're at an Ubuntu command line, and everything works as it is. And it uses the networking layer of the machine itself, so there's nothing more to do. It's quite easy. But it's the only way that I can run this CoolRetroTerm. It doesn't have a Windows equivalent. There's always a guy on GitHub who has been working on his Windows version, but it's still a work in progress. I've looked at it, and it doesn't do as many good things as this does on its own. So that's what you have to do. You have to install the Windows subsystem for Linux, and it's not hard to do. There's two versions. There's WSL and WSL2. You can tell it which one. After you install WSL, you can then go switch over to WSL2, which is apparently the enhanced, the latest and greatest. It gives you a couple of extra things, but for the most part, you won't even know the difference. How do you do it? Well, it's not too hard. I'm not going to go through the whole process of doing it because I've already done it, so I'm not sure how well it would take to me trying to do it over again. But this is essentially it, and I apologize for the typos because it's 4 billion degrees outside. I'm sitting here in my little office drinking my coffee in my Buc-ee's mug. The day's burning on. It's now 2 o'clock, and I made some typos. What can you do? All right, so if you are a Windows person and you are in your PowerShell, and you start PowerShell as administrator, big deal, this is what you're going to see as a prompt. And all you have to do is just type in wsl-install. It'll install it, bing, bang, bang, very quickly. And then after that, you're going to be asked to go to the Windows Store. And it's a lot easier to do it through the Windows Store than trying to figure out how to load an ISO. Go to the Windows Store, get Ubuntu or Fedora or whatever's out there. Whatever your flavor du jour is, I use Ubuntu because most of the instructions that I find here and there have Ubuntu as their sourcing. You get it, it loads it, takes no time at all. Nothing happens. It's not a graphic environment. You can create a graphic environment, but that's got a lot of steps. But it's a terminal environment. So it's one of those things that just sits there in the background. You never know it's there until you want to call it. And then once that's all installed, if you want to go into the Linux environment through PowerShell, all you do is just type in WSL and it will start up its Linux environment, a terminal environment. So what you do at that point, now it's going to ask you for a username and password the first time around, and you give it whatever name you like, Billy Bob or Ernie Tech. Well, don't give it Ernie Tech. Anyway, whatever name you want. And then you can SU into root, giving it the same password. You don't need to. You can just sudo most of this stuff. But anyway, I'm in there as root. Your PC may vary. That's where it's going to mount you. As you can see, it's got a mount point, and the subsystem comes in right from there. But you can flip back out of there, and it looks just like Linux. You can flip out of there once you get into the Linux environment, and it will look like you are in just good old Linux. So the first thing you have to do once you are in the subsystem, after you type WSL and you log in, is you would do a sudo. You can do a sudo update just to make sure everything's cooking right. You got everything in the repository. Install snap. And the reason why you have to install snap is because CoolRetroTerm is running in a snap environment. I tried to load it as just an install under APT, and it said, no, I can't do that, but I did find a snap version. Okay, we'll do snap. The other thing you want to do is you want to install these two things. That's your C3270 and X3270. And the reason why you install both, even though you're not going to use the X environment, is apparently there are some dependencies in here which are needed by here. So if you just install C3270 as your terminal emulator for 3270, it won't work. It'll just drop out. It needs to have this installed, even though you're not going to use the X version, the dependencies are there. You know what I'm talking about. And then install snap. Well, you did that. Install the CoolRetroTerm. Got to put an R in there, of course, from the snap environment, and then you run CoolRetroTerm from the snap environment. And once that starts up, it actually takes about 10 seconds. You can see it going through a lot of thinking. Then from within that environment, when you're inside of CoolRetroTerm, then you call your terminal emulator to connect to whatever Hercules host, or maybe a Moshix's tech host, or wherever you want. And then you're cooking. All right. Wow, that was a lot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drag over a running instance of CoolRetroTerm and show you how this works. All right, pretty screen. Drag her over, and there she is. So right now, it is acting just like any other terminal in your Linux environment. Obviously, you're going to hope that your terminal looks a little bit nicer than this, but the point is that you want it to look like an old CRT. It does a good job of that. So you can see here that it should just tell me the stuff that you get anyway. So you are actually in Windows, but you're in Linux because you're in the WSL environment. And this is all you get to it through PowerShell. You go to PowerShell on Windows like normal, you start WSL, and the next thing you know, you're in Linux. Yeah, it's really neat, and I got a lot of things I want to do to play with this. A lot of things. And no time, of course. So let me just get to settings and show you a couple interesting things. So I talked a few minutes ago about the PC 5150 standalone personal computer and the Apple. And the reason why I mentioned them is because this also has some presets that are supposed to look like what you would see if you were running an Apple II. Let's say I have Apple II and I say load. Now, that's hideous, but maybe that's what it looked like when you're running your Apple II. I don't know. Maybe if you are working with an early version of IBM DOS and you're in the 5150, load that, and now you say, well, that's even worse. Well, hang on a second now. Let's just play with those two things for a second. Let's just leave it there. I can go over here to Terminal and I can say, well, how do I want these things to look? How do I want the rasterization to work? Do I want to use rasterizing through scan lines or pixels or the default, whatever that is? The name, 1985 IBM DOS, pretty cool. Over here are effects, and when you click any of these things, you either activate or deactivate the effect. So if I take off the red, green, blue shift, watch what happens. Ah, she gets prettier. I leave that off because my old eyes can't take that. Let's say you thought that flickering was a feature of your old CRT environment. You can flicker the heck out of this thing. Now, my experience has been that if you've got a lot of flicker and jitter and things like that, your power supply is going. If the power supply on your monitor is going, you're going to get an awful lot of this kind of stuff. So I don't want any flickering. What I do want is to make this curve, the curve of the CRT. And that's what it's supposed to emulate, how curved the CRT is. Now, way back when, it was practically an oscilloscope. I guess it looked like that. But later, now there's no benefit to that because after all, that's the same as having a regular old terminal. So let's put it just about like that. Take off the jitter. Now I can add some static noise. Now your monitor is playing Outer Limits. I'll leave it like that just for fun. Now there is a thing called bloom. Of course, if you recall back in the day, and this often happened when the power supply, the voltage was too high, it would cause the characters to have a slight amount of bloom around them. So have a look and see how that changes. See that? So if your power supply tended to have a lot more voltage than it was supposed to have, for whatever reason, you would get, probably get X-rayed, but that's what it might look like. I'm going to leave that just about there. Now, what's this thing going down here? Well, that's supposed to emulate the scan line that you might see. Now, watch what happens if I turn this up. You get a really pronounced scan line. I don't want to do anything that's annoying. I just want to show you how customizable this might be. So if I took this down to maybe about there, just enough to see it. And lastly, which is kind of neat, remember, think of the days when you were at the data center or at your desk and you had a CRT and you had a blinking fluorescent bulb over your head and you're sitting in your Herman Miller chair. You might get a lot of, hang on here, ambient light. You might even see yourself from the screen. So now it's starting to look like your old TV set from 1975 when you're watching cartoons in the morning. But it's an amazing piece of software in how much effort this guy went into to make this look like it's something that you might have seen back in the day. Kind of fun to play with. Again, doesn't add anything. Doesn't make you a better programmer, that's for sure. May make your eyes a little weary, but nevertheless. Let's leave it just about like that. But also notice that we're now looking at color. And that's because that might have been available with whatever monitor you were using back in those DOS days. But let's go back over to General, and let's change this now. Let's go to the Apple II environment. Load that up. So, same kind of a thing. You can go in there and make some changes, reduce the screen curvature. You can, let's leave it like that. You can change the font width. You get it now, right? You kind of get the gist here. I'm not going to use this, but all right. Let's go to IBM 3278 because that's what we referred to in the second screen of this presentation. Video presentation. Boy, I feel like I'm back in my working days. Here's my presentation, boss. Hold on, more coffee. And my Buc-ee's mug. And I can't wait for Buc-ee's to be open in Virginia. I'm taking that 5-hour drive when that happens because that's what you do. All right, let's load up the IBM 3278, see what she looks like. All right, not so great, but we can improve that. We can make her pretty. So let's change the screen curvature a little bit outward. Let's add a little bit of ambient light. No real glow line per se. Maybe a little like that. No shift, no flickering. Bloom and burn in. Well, have a look at the screen now. So there's your burn in. There's your bloom. It can be cute, but yeah, right. You could add your command line options here, which there are very few. There's a command line option for setting the terminal types. You can put in -model 2 to model 3. You could put in 3278-4E. You could do all that kind of stuff just by clicking on here and putting it in there, and that way you didn't have to specify it at the command line when you started this thing. Brightness, contrast, the usual stuff that you would see if you opened the side of the thing up and you played around with the knobs back in the day. All right, let's leave it like that. But before I do, I want to talk about this for a second. The amber. Again, I just want to get a little sense for when this happened. When did amber start to become the thing? I kind of remember it, but not tremendously. But let's just play with this a little. Let's just play with the amber. Screen curvature, flatten you out a little bit, leave that like that. That's no big deal. And then we can just kill that. Boom, like that. Now, how do I get into, let's say, the mainframe environment? Well, let's see what happens here. Let me see if we can get this thing to work. Sometimes you can get things to work right off the bat. Sometimes it takes a little bit of coaching. So I have C3270 started. So if I just do that, and the other thing is I might get a complaint. We'll see. We're going to play with this together. Let's type in localhost 3270, and let's see what she does. Now, so what I need to do is find an active server. So my server should be active, but for some reason, oh, I know why, because I had rebooted this doggone thing. Let's try Moshix's server. C3270 www.moshix.tech 300, and there we are. Now, the reason why I couldn't get into my my server was because I forgot that I had shut my Hercules server down when I did a couple of reboots on this while I was installing CoolRetroTerm. I can do that, but it's the same thing here. So now we are into Moshix's Form 3270. And that's pretty cool because that's what it might look like if you were back in the day and you were working on a monochrome screen, a Model 4, I guess, in this case. And that's what it would look like, or Model 3. Oh, let's log in. Ba-da-bum. Hang on here. So if you wanted to add a little pizzazz to your experience with your emulation stuff, if you wanted to make it look a little more, I don't know, accurate, fun, this is what you would do. And if you're using Linux or Mac, you just go ahead and download this thing and install it directly. I think on Mac it's what they call a DMG or something. I don't have a Macintosh. On Linux it would be a Deb if you're in a Debian environment or whatever the case may be. Now again, I tried to install it from the repository. Maybe it's just the way my system works, but you might have a better time if you have a different repository or a different environment of just saying apt install and then CoolRetroTerm or however you do it through your distro. But yeah, I mean that's really it. And it's really cool. And I think it's one of those things that can add to your fun. So anyhow, all right, I'm going to pop out of here. Just wanted to show you what it looked like. Before we do that, let's just see how it does look on a couple of things. All right, so I didn't put any events in there. That's fine. And if you're not familiar with Moshix's Form 3270, you really deserve to jump in there. It's at moshix.tech, and that is the actual server. So you have to set up an emulator for that. I have a video. One of my past videos shows you how to do that. What else can we show? The extended menu. You can log into the MVS. Right now I'm not going to because I haven't really had a lot of time to work on it yet. I'm going to soon. Let's go with the clock. Pretty cool. All right, now you can't change the way things look when you're connected. I was going to hop out of here, but I want to do a couple things first. I'm on a roll, right? When you're on a roll, you just keep on going. These won't work once you're connected to something. When you get out of this, you can make some changes. So let's do that. Let's pop out of here. And let's log off. And okay, we're back at the normal prompt. Now, if I go up here to settings and I change the settings, let's try it with monochrome green. Okay. Or, no, actually, let's go with this, 3278, because there's some color associated with it. Let me see. Now, let me do it with the IBM DOS. Okay, let's go with IBM DOS. Let's make things look pretty. Let's get the curvature a little flat. Let's get rid of that goofy shift. Let's back the bloom down. Let's get rid of the burn-in. Let's get rid of the static. Let's get rid of the jitter. The glow line is not necessary. Leave it like that. And get rid of the flickering. Not a lot left here. But anyway, watch this. I'll put it just about there like that. I can also, if I recall correctly, hang on. I could also change the margin to give it a little bit more room. See how I'm moving that around to make it a little bit less stuck in the corner there. So let's just put it over like that. I can also change the contrast and brightness, make it a little bit prettier. Let's leave it just like that. Pop out of there. And then let's go back into Moshix Tech and see what it looks like in this environment. Now, a very different environment. Watch this. So now we're in a more modern environment because we are now in the 3279 environment. So this is something that I think you could actually have a lot of fun with in Linux or in Mac, or if you want to go the extra step and do it in Windows using the WSL. This will add a lot to your enjoyment. It does to me anyway. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay cool on this terribly hot day if you're in the northeast corner of the good old US of A. And thanks for subscribing. Thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.